We should introduce the show.
Do we have to? Seriously, man. Like, we have to. I mean, you make me do it every single time.
Okay,
Can't
I'll
we just,
do
like,
it.
Not introduce the show at all.
Should we at least say that we're called Keyword Crypto? Hello, you're listening to.
No, and definitely not say that that's Chris DeRose, because
Okay.
Fuck that.
Then screw it. Hello, everyone. You're listening to Keyword Crypto. We are crypto fans and crypto skeptics. A voice of reason in this space, apparently, hopefully, at least some of the time. Today, we're very grateful to have a veteran journalist in the Bitcoin world, Chris DeRose. Chris, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
What's up, party people? Glad to be here.
Oh man, you've got an intro. You should have done the intro. Let's
Seriously,
start over.
We need to
again.
learn from you, dude. Our intros are so bad. So is that how you introduce all your stuff?
Yeah, basically. I don't know. I started with Counterparty, and it seemed like it would be fitting at the time, and then at this point, it's kind of like my shtick. But I think that it also works at like multiple levels. It could be certainly Counterparty. It could also be like fun time, or it could be political time. So it offers a lot of versatility, I think, and I've enjoyed it for that reason.
Nice.
It's funny because like the branding for our show is that we don't really know what we're doing or what we're talking about. And you've got some pretty awesome branding. It's like, welcome to the party with Chris DeRose. How long? I'm curious about when it comes to your show, your YouTube show and your podcast, Bitcoin Uncensored. How long did it take for you to get started and comfortable and getting your thing going and just like know you had an audience and stuff like that?
It actually took off pretty quickly, and it was mostly started as a lark and a fun time for me and Junseth, my co-host at the time. And there wasn't nearly as much content in the space back then in 2013. So I think it was maybe like 4 other shows, Adam Levine's show being the primary show. I guess before that, there was, quote unquote, the Bitcoin show, which was itself a whole thing. And that was even the very first Bitcoin show, aptly titled. And so I back then, I think people were really hungry for content, and something about what we were doing resonated, and it just kind of flew real fast.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so this is actually exactly what I wanted to talk to you about because
it's like the opposite of us.
Yeah, and I mean, we are like relative crypto noobs. We came in 2016, 2017 when stuff started to go crazy, and even in 2017 there wasn't a whole lot of content. I mean, like you could search YouTube for Bitcoin, but most of it was pretty bad. Like, or it just seemed like it was, I don't know, video from the 90s or something. I don't know why Bitcoin has this low quality thing going on when it's supposed to be relatively high tech. But I want to hear more stories about it.
Oh man, there are so many.
Yeah, well, where to begin? I mean, like 2013. Jeez.
Yeah. So can you talk about like what got, like, I don't know, like what things were like back when you were doing your podcast or your show?
Set the stage.
Man, sure. So the earliest shows were Q&As, and we would take a question and try to provide a 3-minute answer. And that was like the earliest content. And that kept up, I don't know for how many videos, but quite a few. It was easy content to do. It was fun content to do. And you could wrap it up in like a couple minutes. And after a point when I think I got comfortable enough talking on camera, we started to just increase the distractions as almost like a matter of fortitude. And I don't know, like a strength like a Bitcoin strength training program maybe. So like if you look through some of my videos, we would go out and about to find weird stuff happening, and then we would just turn the camera on, grab a question off the pile, and I would just go at it like right off the top of my head. And some of the early stuff was, I think once we had one of my favorites at least, I forgot which question it was, but we had a fire truck called on like a house, like right next to us. Like the camera started rolling, I started doing the video, and then in the distance I hear like the ambulance coming or the fire truck's coming. And as they get closer and closer, we realize it's literally the house we're in front of that they're coming out to for some reason. And we didn't stop the cameras at any point, and I just kept on talking. And with like extreme endurance, I managed to keep this thing going and keep it together while the firefighters were next to us unraveling, and they were getting pissed that we were like recording and nobody really knew what was going on. It was very strange. I think it was a car accident. That's what it was. No, it was a car accident. That's what had happened.
Oh,
yeah,
man,
I feel like that epitomizes Bitcoin right there. That story. That's literally that to me. Agreed. When I try to explain Bitcoin to people, that's the story I'm going to use from now on.
So like in terms of talking about crypto though, car accidents on camera are awesome, but like my question is were you guys taking Bitcoin seriously back then, or was it just an opportunity to get good content like that, or you were just doing crazy stuff and looking for opportunities to be journalists? Was it something that were you convinced that Bitcoin was going to change the world in 2013?
Yeah, no, I took it very seriously. You have to consider that like this great power was bestowed upon the darkest regions of the internet, like incompetence and with like I don't know, like without abandon. It used to be that money like was a very protected part of society. And I don't know, like a big part of the blockchain story is like, or the Bitcoin story, but more to the blockchain story. The regulators were kind of asleep at the wheel. I think there was a serious lapse in how America's policing was designed. And so all of a sudden, things that were once like very illegal were just A-okay. But like nobody circulated that memo around, so like nobody in positions of power got that hint. And like there was a couple weirdos on the internet, like myself, who saw this thing and was very much enamored by that power, and we were able to run with it while nobody else was looking. So and this money always tends to amplify the perverseness of people. I don't know why that is, but look at the guys that like strike it big. And then they just go large on life, and it seems like that leverage that money provides facilitates that. So I think that is what happened with Bitcoin in the early days. And the lore and the myth is filled with these stories of eccentric personalities bestowed with great wealth doing, things like starting their own country in the aftermath. And it's just like part and parcel with that experience.
Hey, so in the interview you did with Saifedean, I watched that last night, and if people haven't had a chance to see that, it's epic because
thanks.
Honestly, the best part, my favorite part was when his internet went out, so I didn't have to listen to him anymore because I agree with you on most stuff, and when people like that start talking, I just want to like rip my hair out, and I don't have that much hair left, and so I try not to listen to that kind of stuff. But you said a couple things that were interesting.
Wait,
and I don't know
what kind of stuff does he talk? Who is this guy? Introduce this guy for me, because
hold on, really fast. Okay, well. So hold on. Let me ask the question first, and then I'll have and we can have Chris talk about that interview. You said, and I don't know if you were just trolling him, but you said you were never educated, and you didn't go to public school.
That's
and
largely
I wanted
true.
To know,
okay. I don't know. I have a very complex relationship with education. It has never been easy for me. What I probably said was that I never went to school, and that's largely true. I think I went until the age of like 16, maybe 15, something like that. And I went to public school for like a month, I want to say. 2 months maybe, tops. I went to a private school before that. But yeah, that's true.
And then what happened after 15 or 16?
Well, my story has kind of been very perfect for Bitcoin in the sense that I've survived a number of bubbles. So that was the introduction to the first bubble at age 15 or 16, when I decided that school was a waste of my time. And I went to work for onlinetrading.com. And that was a South Florida-based brokerage firm / domain purchaser. It was kind of a strange company at the time. It got bought out by a larger company, and is now, I believe, still like very well advertised, and a very large company, even on like CNBC and some of the financial networks and such. But at the time, it was a small endeavor, and I was in there as one of the earliest employees. So that was at like, I think 17, 16, something like that. And at the time, they knew I was young. They didn't know how young, but this was during like the dot-com mania. And if you could type over 80 words per minute, you had a job. And then if you knew like Unix, then you were like really a shoo-in. And so I had those skills. And I've always been a computer guy. And so the thing about education, and I think with myself, is that I've never had any like real formal education, but I read a lot, and I love learning, and I've done it all my life. So to the degree that I'm educated, it's perhaps like a bit confusing because I'm certainly not credentialed in any formal capacity, but as an autodidact, I think generally is rarely the case that I find myself at a loss for words, I suppose, to put it bluntly.
And what's autodidact?
Self-educated.
Because I
Yes.
know, but I want to make sure everybody else knows.
An autodidact is somebody who teaches themselves.
Oh, okay, nice.
Yes.
See, you learn something new every day. And you do have a wicked large vocabulary, which has me reaching for the dictionary multiple times during an interview. So, well done. For somebody who is self-taught, it's pretty impressive.
Got to work on that. It's a bad habit. I shouldn't do that. It comes out, like I said, I read a lot. And then, if you can believe it, I'm also constantly referring to the dictionary. So
no, it's good. It's good.
Try to take out the really complex stuff. And,
It's a bad habit because you end up confusing people. Is that why? Yeah.
Well, the function of communication is to persuade, and when you are communicating, you need to find some balance between denominational content and specialized content. And if you reach too high, you alienate parts of your audience. So the trick is to do like the Ernest Hemingway thing, where you speak at like a third grade reading level about things that are highly complex, and it takes a lot of patience to do. Some days I have that, some days I don't, I guess.
Yeah. I was actually wondering if that's a tactic you use sometimes to shut people down at all, who are a little maybe aggressive or condescending. Because I've noticed you do it sometimes, and I wasn't sure if it was... Because we had Daniel Krawitz on one time, and he talked about trying to weed out the lower IQ people. And using language to figure that, to do that. As a way to do that. And I was wondering if maybe that was something that you had incorporated into
I don't think I do it overtly, but like it clearly happens. Sometimes it's just like there's a succinct way of dismissing something that you just don't want to spend your time on. Or at least I find that. And then, like I said, I don't have patience. So like it's arguable what my intent is at that point. Is it an intent? I mean, I guess it's the question of like whether or not I'm like patronizing them, maybe with like like an escalation of verbiage, but perhaps, not
because
in a kind way.
That is a maximalist type of, and also kind of like an alt-righty type of tactic, and to try to win conversations, to try to confuse the other person with words and jargon that they kind of string together that don't always necessarily make complete sense for anybody who actually knows what those words mean. You don't do that, but it almost sounds. But when I see you encountering maximalists who do that, I catch you kind of like stepping up the game a little bit and taking their tactic and like just pretty much burning them down, and they don't even really fully get that they're losing the argument, pretty badly.
It's using irony to get somebody to kind of defeat themselves. That's the way.
I do a lot. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's the way I see it.
That's what that's I think in my own mind, at least what I see myself often doing is extrapolating to the degree of absurdity and then leaving them with a carnage and seeing how they navigate, which they rarely do well. There's a word that kind of relates to some of this. Cathect, I think it is, I think it's cathect, CATHECT.
We don't actually know any words on this show, so
okay,
go ahead.
that word is, I think, perhaps more apt for like sometimes what I think I find myself doing, which is effectively to remove the investment of energy from some equation with like this word, like here you go, this like summarizes it, and I'm not investing energy from here. And
okay,
that would be
interesting.
Yes, to invest with mental or emotional energy.
There you go. Yes. Yeah.
Huh. Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. So, did you want to jump in, JJ? I don't want
to. I want to get back to the stories. That was fun for me.
Well, so let's talk about that. I mean, do you feel comfortable talking about that Saifedean interview?
Yeah, I will talk about literally anything.
Okay, let's talk about this character.
That's the problem with me.
Is this
so you said So, do you want to explain who he is? Because you probably know better than I do. I just know him as the charlatan snake oil salesman.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would describe him as like a libertarian shaman, and he shows up and he does the shamanic thing, which appeases the crowd. There's like this sort of history of that, I think, in all movements, really, but like in libertarianism, there's a degree that's rather pronounced. And he checked the boxes. You know, he had a very low disgust ratio. He had some degree of eccentric professor heritage, and obviously he was an Austrian. And I guess commensurate with all of that, he just rejected the modern to a degree of almost like a caricature level absurdity. And in any case, he shows up, I don't know, maybe like 3 years ago now, like 2016, I want to say, and having relatively either just discovered Bitcoin or been new to Bitcoin, he proceeded to invest himself in the space, and he probably found what you guys will find or have already found, which is that the space is a fairly shallow place, and it isn't so hard to start making waves as a newcomer. And I think what he started to do then is pull from like Austrian tropes into a platform that fed into the confirmation bias of the libertarian platform. And from there, the leverage just kind of grew. And he became this guy that is drunk on the Bitcoin a bit.
Oh, God.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. To a degree that he really misses.
And for the listeners, he's not actually Austrian. He follows Austrian economics.
Yes.
So he prescribes to Austrian economics. So when he's saying he's Austrian, that's what he meant.
Yes, thank you. That is, yes, exactly. Yes.
Yeah,
we try to keep this show at the third grade level for people.
Well,
I'll go back down.
That's
I'll go back. It's much easier with it.
No, because originally we wanted to do it as like a way to protect our friends and family who don't know anything about the space, and so they don't get crypto jacked. But then we kind of fall down the path of using all the jargon and buzzwords, and I talk to people who listen and they're like, we have no idea what you said. For 45 minutes. I was like, damn it. So now,
actually, you know what? When I first started watching Bitcoin Uncensored, I was like, I don't know what this guy is talking about, but it's fun and interesting, and like I like the words. that was like how I got hooked on the show.
Autodidact means, but it sounds nice.
I was like, I like the tone of this guy's voice and the people he's interviewing. Don't know what they're talking about, but anyway, what you're saying about Bitcoin being actually very shallow is interesting, because we'll get back to the Saifedean interview in a second, but like I've noticed that you get these kind of characters that come in and take over, and not, I mean, like every single, I'm expecting cycles in the future to have more and more generations of people who take their identities from some aspect of crypto. And like we've had people on this show who have almost admitted to taking on that role. Like I'm gonna be the tether whisperer, and like that's gonna be my thing from now on. And like that's gonna be my identity. And then once it catches on and once the Twitter followers grow, it's like, okay, yeah, it's on. This is the game. So I'm assuming this person that we're talking about is kind of like that. He took on Bitcoin as an identity.
Yes.
Okay.
Hey, and you said something really interesting in the interview that stuck with me, is that you said something like, oh, you're a maximalist. I used to be a maximalist until I educated myself.
Yeah.
And I'd like to hear about that story, like outside of the Saifedean thing, because I think like that was the first time I really kind of understood what the trajectory you were taking personally as a crypto fan, or as a crypto whatever you were, superhero, famous person, whatever.
You're an ambassador of crypto land.
Yeah. So like what brought you from maximalism to the normal side, like me and JJ are on?
The normal side.
Yeah. So the history I've had with maximalism has been very deep. I got into an argument with Vitalik a long time ago, and he wrote with John Seth, and he wrote a piece coining the phrase Bitcoin maximalist, at that time, which I don't know if he's ever like officially said it or even that I want that credit, but like the point would be the same, is that they very much correlated with the birth of Bitcoin maximalism, per its originator. So the community that we were in was one united by probably disgust for anything but Bitcoin. And the thesis at the time I thought was pretty sound. In hindsight, I guess I understand why it's not, but at the time at least it made sense. And the thesis was roughly that because regulators are going to probably make most of this stuff illegal, that competes with Bitcoin under the pretense that it's an unregistered security or money or otherwise. Because of that, we are effectively in a zero-sum game, such that any coin that tries to compete with Bitcoin comes a consequence to Bitcoin, sector's success, or Bitcoin's success primarily in the sector thereafter. I think that was the thesis. And over time, it came to be that not only did regulators not exercise much constraint of anyone's competing project, but they seemed to be like open to the idea. So at that point, a lot of the zero-sum game theories go out the window. And then I think too, even at some level of introspection, I would take blame now for exercising too much greed, even in that thesis. Like I think that my greed probably led me towards that conclusion more so than I might have otherwise have held it had I not been so invested in the Bitcoin ticker symbol, which is kind of dumb, really. But that would be like the short path.
I mean, at least you're honest about it. That's further than 99% of maximalists will ever admit, especially on air.
Yeah, well, it's, everyone's perfect, don't you know? Like this is how this space works.
Man, yeah, maximalism to me, it kind of reminds me of like reading about like medieval Christianity or something like.
Oh yeah,
yeah, and how, I mean, it's weird. I don't even like the word, because when I think of minimalism and maximalism, I think of it in terms of art. And if you're a minimalist, you want fewer things and you want fewer assets.
Yeah.
So it's like Bitcoin maximalists are actually just crypto minimalists, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And not that they have any, or something that we get all the time on this show is if we even mention an altcoin, it's like, oh, they're shitcoin shills immediately. And
yeah.
I don't like that, because I feel like we don't have enough conversations about why the altcoins are bad. Maximalists will say, well, they're all scams. All Ethereum tokens are scams. They're just trying, but maximalists don't really seem like they're looking out for the interests of new investors. They don't really seem like they're trying to protect people from scams. If anything, they've got some resentment that investors are even coming in putting money into these things. So, I mean, can we just have a conversation about, okay, if you're going to be Bitcoin is the one true coin and nothing else is worth your time or money, let's talk about why that is and how we can actually keep people from getting scammed by the altcoins, if that's the case, which I don't know if it is.
Well, I point out in that what you just said, that the immediacy of the disgust response is generally what you see in maximalists, and they go straight to the hygienic considerations of your ones and zeros, which is completely absurd to me, that you would hold ones and zeros that are of this shit quality, that the lack of hygiene, which points, I think, number one, to like the efficacy of denominational labels, meaning if they go right to this very base instinct, it seems, that furthers their own like satisfaction and accomplishes their goal. But then I think in addition to that, it kind of demonstrates to the level of sophistication that they've considered this claim. It's a very denominational consideration. So, yeah, it's hard to argue disgust. Like, you can do it, but you'll almost certainly get blocked for yourself being disgusting. It's how that works, I guess.
And I am blocked by half the maximalists. So there you go.
Yeah. And it didn't used to be that way. That's actually when I think I really started to leave the boat. When I saw the blocking, that for me is like the number one, like that's a red light flashing. Okay, this has gone to a degree of absurdity if we have to block information in order to preserve our faith.
I got blocked by Saifedean, and I didn't even know who he was. I had never mentioned him. I had never heard of him, and all of a sudden somebody said something, and I clicked on it, and he's like, "You're blocked by this person." I was like, "Wow."
Oh, hey, Chris, I've got a question before we start talking about the Saifedeans, who I still don't really know who he is. But so since 2013, can you tell me what has changed about the influence of Twitter in crypto? Because oftentimes when we're talking about being blocked and all of the communication, we're actually talking about crypto Twitter, which feels so weird and lame to me. But what is the power, and is that the way we communicate, is using Twitter? Like, was it like that in 2013 at all, or what?
No, the Twitter story is a sad story, at least to me. And it's still kind of developing, and it may not be permanently so. But in 13, and certainly prior, most of the discussions were had on Reddit and on Skype, actually, if you can believe it. Skype was really popular. Yeah. That's a kind of a unheralded
Skype is social media. Wow, okay.
Right. And so a lot of the and Bitcoin Talk, that's the other big one, was Bitcoin Talk. Although Bitcoin Talk had been going on even... So like I started in the space in 2011. That's when I actually... first arrived. That's when I bought my first Bitcoin, and
God damn, dude!
It took
for
like a couple years after that. Yeah. Well, I think it was $8.
How did you even do it back then? That must have been.
That's the thing that I want to like shake people over, because the new people don't understand what risk is, and it really perverts everyone's competence in this subject. But back then. There's a couple ways I bought it. I bought it on a few occasions in the early days. You would either wire by bank money to Japan. And when you did that, it was like society shaming you every step of that way. It was like a viscerally bad idea.
When you say wire, you mean Western Union. You had to Western Union money to Japan.
Not even that. I had to go to at the time. I think I went to Wells Fargo in Boca Raton, and I walked in there, and I did this almost like Roger Ver-esque obstinance act with the manager of the bank, demanding that he let me wire money to this foreign shady bank in Japan. Because you went to the teller said this is not going to happen. We have fraud protection. We don't know what you're doing, but you're getting scammed. Then it went to the floor pit manager, and then it eventually went to the bank manager, where I had to argue and make this case. And the guy wanted me to understand that I was making a terrible decision, and that the money I was sending I was going to lose. That I was involved in some kind of weird scam. And I was by some grace able to nonetheless send that wire over to Mt. Gox, where I was able to buy Bitcoin at the time. And that was one occasion. On another occasion, I think this was Mt. Gox. If not, it was Bitcoinica, but it was one of the early exchanges. I'm pretty sure it was Mt. Gox. They had a deal with God knows what company, where you went into a 7-Eleven, and there's this red phone that is only used by immigrants, and you dial a number into this red phone, and then you have to talk to somebody like an Indian representative who throws out some name that makes no sense. It was you were paying an electric bill, and you sent money that way. You got a number, and then you went to the cash register of 7-Eleven. You give them that number, then you give your money down. And then you had
this is crazy. You're making this shit up.
No, that's how it was back then. Yeah.
Man, last week I was talking about how crypto is basically this crazy movie, and I thought, we're gonna have Chris on next week. He can tell us about the prequels, and the prequels sound like they came out in 1910 or something, because the technology was so low.
Yeah,
and you had to call the immigrant phone. You had to use the immigrant phone,
and it was a landline.
Yeah, the immigrant phone, it's the red phone.
How do you buy Bitcoin? Use the red immigrant phone.
Yes.
All right, go on to continue this story. This is awesome.
That was basically that. I mean, you get lucky sometimes at the meetups, and you would be able to do exchanges with people one way or another. That's another tragic demise that I feel terrible about.
All right, so when you were buying this 6-cent Bitcoin or whatever, were you this is going to be the money of the future, or were you this looks kind of fun, like a game, like I'm gambling? I mean, you said that you were taking it seriously back then. I mean, were you sending hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars?
I'm not going to tell you, because then you're going to figure out.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine.
I bought one Bitcoin. That's my answer to anybody who asks. And Yeah, well, at the time, like I remember trying to tell, like you did this thing where like you tell people that the flood is coming, and you felt like Noah loading up the ark or something. And so I took it very seriously. I felt like here's the thing: is that either it goes to zero or it goes to the moon, and it doesn't seem like there's much in between. And in my estimation, it went to the moon.
You were thinking like an investor back then, and you were in love with the concept of it too. It sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, it was I was thinking of it like I invested back then. Nowadays, I invest in a different way. But yeah, at the time, I didn't put in the mother load. Like, I think Roger Ver put in the mother load, 100% of his net worth kind of thing. And I didn't do that. I never do that. That's gambling. But I put in a good amount, and 1 Bitcoin's worth. And at the time, I told my dad, I'm like, Dad, I'm making this decision. I'm putting money in. And are you with me or not? You always tell me you want in on these ideas, and it's just like this, like just berating me for like pissing money away on this stupid scheme. And he thought I was smarter than that. And rather ceremoniously, he told me that he would happily take 10 grand of my money. We'll just throw that number out. That's not necessarily an accurate number, but he would take 10 grand of my money, and that he would happily guarantee me whatever gains would possibly happen with that. And when those gains didn't come to be, he would give me half my money back, and that way we were both better off. Thankfully, I didn't take him up on that offer. But
thank God, man.
Yeah, if you did the numbers,
bankrupt your dad.
Oh my God, I will. Yes, absolutely.
So it sounds like your dad was familiar with these schemes of yours. Like you had other things that you were into where you tried to flip money. I'm just like, I don't know.
The thing is that I do have like this mark of zealotry that gets into me, and I don't necessarily have that. Yeah, well, I think there's a degree of it that's healthy, especially in young men, and I think that he could see that mark of zealotry when it appeared, and it didn't always appear on matters of finance. In fact, I think it rarely did. But like I loved my cars. I got a little zealous there, and I loved like open source software. Like it was effectively random. Like when those would like show up. So I think he recognized that. And there is a degree of impulsivity that goes with it. And so like he was engaging at that level. And I'm guessing that was what, his characterization was. But I'm glad that, the thing about it is, it paid for itself. So like the zealotry, it's good when you're young. It's not so attractive when you get older, I think. But when you're young and you can take risks, it's an appropriate response.
So what got you away from the maximalism and the zealotry?
Well, it started with the recognition that the regulators are. Well, I think that the easy answer there is that like regulations are kind of perverse in America right now. I don't necessarily mind them the way they are, but there's like a distinct change in how I remembered regulations being pursued even 20 years ago. And when it seemed that like these just crazy scams were happening without any form of damage, I think I started to realize, okay, the theory has some flaws. And I think now, like what it would seem to me is that there's no lobbying pressure against crypto. So why would there be regulation against crypto? Like there is no other guiding institution maybe in American regulation. So like that actually does make sense now to me, but that didn't make sense at the time. I thought there was still some like moral imperative, whatever that might mean, that guided their decisions. And maybe there is, that the jury's still out on some of that. They do seem to be enforcing, but at the time it just seemed like it was getting extreme. And then I think on top of that, I started doing the numbers on how much money I've lost as a result of this theory. And that's where it gets to be a little bit more damning in terms of like the flaws of maximalism. And we can talk about those.
Lost or left on the table?
Left on the table. About? I mean, it's, kind of arguable. Left on the table, I would probably say. But it's very arguable. You
mean by not investing in altcoins?
Yeah. So like I actually, and I will say too, like I actually did make money investing in altcoins, and I also left a lot of money on the table by selling altcoins too soon. So like I bought Darkcoin before it was Dash, and I was very happy with a profit that was just so far from what it could have been.
Man.
I mean, it's like tens of millions of dollars at like, the peak valuation of Dash. It's like really not a small number. So there was like the humility of that folly there that I probably had to contend with, I'd say.
So like the FOMO exists everywhere. Like even for somebody who invested as early as you're like, God damn it, I could have made more on my investment. I mean, because most people lost money on altcoins. It's actually one of the reasons that there's so much, disdain for anything that isn't Bitcoin right now, because oh man, they look so bad if you look at the charts or whatever. But
Peter McCormack is open about how much money he lost, and it seems like it's because he got caught up in that hype, and then also because of the bear market. But I think he's open. He openly talks about it, and and I appreciate that because he's so honest about how much he lost.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad that you're talking about it too, because it makes some of these guys you hear on Twitter that have been around as long as you have, talking about how much how well they do when they're trading and investing and all that stuff. You don't quite hear enough about how people lost out. So those feelings and those emotions kind of feel like we're different generations. So it's good to hear that you're still human and you still have those feelings, even though you were around at a different time.
Yeah, that's the way I see it. It's kind of perverse, but I think for a bunch of reasons, like confidence and affirmation get pumped in this space and on Twitter and social media. It's very much a sort of artifact of the times that only people with bright teeth and beautiful looks and winning vacations and such make it to the front page, and people with perhaps less like sparkle but more wisdom are not being promoted. And so I think that it kind of gets wrapped up into that. But yeah, I mean, we could talk about indexing in some of this, which I think is an important consideration to really understand my development. And you tell me, is that something we want to hear about?
Explain it.
What is indexing?
Yeah, okay,
I don't
great.
even know what that means.
Okay, good. Yeah, so like there's a wisdom. You go in your youth with zealotry and piss and vinegar of adolescence into these decisions that are a little bit overbearing, and you do things like make Hail Mary passes and bold moves, which are fine for your age.
Yes. I dropped everything to tour in a rock band. Yeah. That's what
exactly.
I did.
And that's wonderful. I mean, you want to do that when you're young. Not so much when you're older, but absolutely when you're young. And as you get older, you start to, a lot of things change. You start to have different values, one of which is, in my estimation, a notion of risk compensation. And we all have this notion. Gamblers have less of it than investors do. But the idea is that, well, you can look at a lotto ticket, and the lotto ticket pays out, 10,000 to 1 or more on a win. And so there's all of this compensation that you receive. But in terms of like the actual risk-adjusted compensation, well, it's not so good. Most of us will never win the lottery. It would take maybe 10,000 lives or so for you to possibly win that number. So we don't actually play the lottery if we're investors. If we're gamblers, we play the lottery. And there's a lot of arguments about that are fine and good. I don't want to even discourage anybody from doing it. It's a very small loss. But in investing, it becomes more pronounced. So when you actively manage your portfolio, you pick tickers individually. It's kind of like buying lotto tickets, in my estimation. It's not necessarily a matter of math. It's probably something along the lines of like astrology and gut, which are fine gambling techniques, not so much investing techniques. So indexing roughly is a kind of spin on some of these ideas. The idea is in indexing, you should bet on sectors, not individual tickers. And in doing so, you capture the gains of the sector, and the degree of compensation for your risk is significantly higher. So like there's a few like big ideas in there that I synopsized, but if you do the numbers, that's a pattern that performs well over time.
So when investing in sectors, how is that different than diversifying?
It's the same exact thing. It's really the same exact thing. So like, when I didn't mind having a substantial chunk of my money in crypto when I was younger, but now I don't know. I want crypto to be able to go to zero and like not have to bat an eye. But at the same time, I don't want to see crypto go to the moon and have bat an eye. So like there's a percentage of my wealth that I keep in crypto, and then within that sector, I play all of the tickers in the top 10. roughly. I have to confess, I have a love for Monero, and so I do have some money in there maybe, and that's not in the top 10. But
it is now.
In any case,
just got in the top 10 today.
Maybe. Oh, did it? Yeah, I don't even.
Yep.
I try not to even check, honestly.
Just bumped
Monero's
awesome.
Monero's my favorite too.
Wonderful.
It's like the only one that's being used outside of Bitcoin and maybe Ethereum, but
Yeah, it's true. I mean, you can tell how useful something is by like how much regulatory constraints there is against it. Frankly, like you know.
Well, one of the things that kind of rubs me the wrong way when it comes to like maximalism is we're talking about money here and like what is going to be the best money, and people love to argue about what makes money good and why we should have a certain money a certain way. But one of the reasons I like Vitalik and what he brought is he said, you know, we're talking about something way more than money here. Even just the idea of a contract is something that is an agreement between two people or two machines or whatever. To me, that's like, okay, we're talking about money, sure, but we're talking about so many other things. Can we have a conversation about that? I feel like that to me is like, okay, look at all these different sectors of crypto. It's not just money. Does that sound like do I sound ignorant when I say that, being somebody who is relatively new to crypto? Or is there some validity to that?
There's validity to that. I will say that there's a lot of hyperbole in those spaces as well, which makes it hard to like say with deep conviction that there's validity to that, but there's certainly validity to it.
Yeah, dApps aren't really being used right now and stuff, but like, I don't know, like Bitcoin wasn't really being used at the beginning either, except maybe to buy drugs. So
yeah,
maybe that's a big use.
Yeah, I mean that's really a big part of what got me into it is the clandestine use of it. For me, that was a major buy indicator. When I first discovered Bitcoin, I was like, okay, this was an interesting idea. It's a toy. I don't know what the value is. And then when Silk Road came, that was when I was like, oh, okay, I get this now. This makes perfect sense. And for me, that was like the killer app. Always was. I think it still is. It's embarrassing for some people for reasons I don't understand, but. Nonetheless, it's
yeah, that's how I discovered it too. Not because I was buying drugs, but because I saw a movie called Dope, which was all about a kid who sells drugs in high school and for Bitcoin. And I was like, okay, Bitcoin, if this is a real thing, then so yeah, that was drug money back then. That's why I got interested in it in the first place.
That movie I saw the day it opened, and that might be the first Bitcoin Uncensored video that was censored because we got into a fist fight outside the theater. And the cops came, and it was a whole thing. And then we just decided not to release that video.
You and Juniseth? You and your co-host
Juniseth,
Juniseth?
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I was. What happened? I think Juniseth got drunk, and one thing led to another. Oh, and then there was like this rehab place that came there, which was a bad idea to take rehab kids to see this movie. But you know, it's Florida. There's lots of rehab like buses.
Jesus fucking Christ!
And something happened. Words were like thrown, and then before you know it, I got stuck. There's a video of it out there somewhere where I got stuck in the face on camera. I was running the interviews, and one of the punk asses from the sober living place ran up and punched me in the face, and then the brawl broke out after that. And the way we avoided ourselves getting, because we weren't like lily white, but the way we avoided going to jail that night was we had a buddy that was a stutterer, and he's awesome. He's one of my favorite people, and he's hilarious. He's actually one of the funniest people I know. And for reasons that were completely accidental, they pointed out the wrong person. They pointed at him, telling the cops that he was drunk when he wasn't the drunk. Junseth was the drunk. And then the cops went to talk to him, realized he had a major stuttering issue, and then decided not to arrest anybody because it was a misunderstanding, which was half true. Wow. It was supposed to be just like this coincidence that made everybody okay.
That's pretty funny.
It was funny.
That was like 2014 or 2015, I think. Maybe 2015. Yeah.
Forgot about
that's a funny story.
That.
Yeah. Yeah, I got so many questions for you.
Sure.
I don't even know where to begin. Well, I guess so. Last week we were talking about Craig Wright and how he is such a colorful character in the Bitcoin story. I wanted to know, we've in the past we've had all these, we've had Roger Ver, we've got fucking John McAfee, and like all these weirdos talking about what's his name, Saifedean, the other guy.
Saifedean.
So I want to know, in the Bitcoin prequel, who are some of the villains of the past? Some people that I want to know what this movie was like. I want to know just some more stories of like, you know,
the origin story.
The origin story. Who were the bad guys back then in 2013?
Well, the very first one was probably, in short order, I would say Bruce Wagner of the Bitcoin Show. That was a very hilarious bad guy. There was Big Vern of Cripsy.
Big Vern. I forgot about Big Vern. We don't talk enough. We talk about Mark Karpellas a lot, but not Big Vern.
Yeah. There was Joe Tongd of Bitcoinica. You may or may not know about.
I don't know. We don't know any. We don't hear about Bitcoinica. I don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
Like we know the Mt. Gox story backwards and forwards, especially thanks to Peter McCormick's interviews, which were awesome. But yeah, we don't really know. Like the Cripsy thing, we kind of hear about as like it's another Alamo, and Bitcoinica. But yeah, we just don't hear about this stuff. So I'm glad you're talking about it. Let's bring it back to life.
Pirate at 40 is another great one. That was a really good one.
What is that?
Pirates at 40. That was a guy's name. He showed up with a Ponzi scheme that we still don't know what the deal is, but it does sound like it's very connected to Mt. Gox. And then there's Danny Brewster. I mean, the Bitcoin calamities are second to none. They're really like just the funniest stories. And they're generally like the same in theme. Somebody with too much confidence gets in front of the camera, makes a promise he can't keep, only to either get robbed or himself make off with the money in some way that usually backfires. Usually, not always, but usually backfires in a spectacular capacity.
So when the cycles, when the cycles come back and you see the next generation of these people as well as the gullible people who kind of step in, like, I mean, do you just take a step back and let it happen, or do you at this point you must be like, here we go again, here come the charlatans, like they're clowns or something like that, and and this time it's going to be Twitter, and this time it's going to be YouTube, and then like, is it just always another forum for these crazies that come out? I mean, hope springs eternal, and there's a sucker born every minute. There's like these forces that are sort of part of the human condition. And there have been times when I try to like do something about it, and like even that doesn't work for reasons that are perverse. So like, I think even indexing kind of works in this now, because like now I'm like, well, like if you can't stop these forces, you might as well like expose yourself to the risks. And who knows? Like one of them may very well turn out to be like the best thing to happen. But
so you're all in on Dogecoin then?
I'm not all in on Dogecoin. No, I don't think I have any Dogecoin. I probably do. I should take that back, but I haven't looked for it. God only knows where that is. Some safe deposit box somewhere.
So you've taken a journey away from, I guess, like, were you ever a libertarian?
I always dabbled on the libertarian side. I was very captivated by it, but I don't think I ever really presented as one. Or the thing is that like these words appear like libertarian, or let's see. I mean, they're generally political, so like feminist would be another one. And they show up, and through some accident of history, they seem to get imbued with a virtue, at which time everybody attaches to that word. And then a process of rot basically happens, wherein like there's no policing of the brand, and it starts to fall into disarray. So like there's a classical libertarianism that I do find significantly more compelling than the modern libertarianism. And so like in the Milton Friedman sense, I think that there's some nice value to the platform. That being said, like there's also some inherent weaknesses. It requires a degree of like cultural homogeneity that I think is unrealistic in modern times. And so in any case, I don't think that libertarianism is really that reasonable in the modern incarnation, and I think it was marginally reasonable in prior incarnations. So making fun of libertarians has actually been a big part of the show, because there's a religiosity to it that is just crazy sometimes.
It's easy to do.
I love doing it on the show too. So the reason I ask is because a lot of your, like, going back to your tactics on Twitter, you retweet and say some, I I mean, I guess the only way to say it from a lefty standpoint is like relatively offensive things. But
That's all relative. More than that.
That's very PC
like
way to say
yeah,
it. You
really.
say mean shit.
I don't want to like completely throw you under the bus, but you do say some. But I can't tell if it's a tactic, because then, you know, I listened to your interview with Saifuddin and I'm like, he doesn't seem to believe any of the offensive stuff he just said, because he seemed like everything he's attacking Saifuddin for.
Oh yeah, that's a good question.
Is
your approach to guests?
Yeah, and so I'm wondering if this is all just kind of like another tactic of kind of putting people on their toes, because I do it too. I come out throwing punches on Twitter, and then I let them punch themselves out against me on Twitter, and then when it's over, I'm like, oh hey, how about you come on the show? And they're like blindsided and then appeased, and then we kind of get along at that point. And so I definitely have a specific tactic that even JJ wasn't aware of, and I was like, no, hold on,
yeah.
let him keep screaming and yelling at me, let him get it all out of his system, and then I'll be like, oh, I actually don't think that I agree with you on this, and that boom, like they're back on their toes, and I'm like, now come on our show.
Yeah.
And
I'm like, dude, Michael, stop making enemies with everybody.
But it seems like your tactic is saying insanely offensive things about things that you kind of agree with, but may not agree with the exact place that it's at in this moment. Like I never, in your interviews, I've never felt like you're anti-feminist, but like you said, you don't, like, it's kind of, they didn't police themselves, and it seems like it's kind of gone off the tracks a little bit, even though it seems like you kind of agree with a lot of most of the takes of egalitarianism, equality, things like that. But, you know, please correct me if I'm completely mischaracterizing.
Yeah, no.
What I've
it kind of, I have to confess that like my Twitter identities, like I'm a big fan of changing identity to suit any given occasion, and it's perverse because like there's this weird deal that you make in the modern world with like the neurotics. I'm trying to figure this out, but like in any given crowd of people, like the group identity is oftentimes controlled by like the intolerant minority. So you have people who are like in some degree like hysterical or neurotic to like even the minority of those in attendance, and that perverts the ability for the other 80% to have a content evaluation that is, in my estimation, more productive. So like the easy way to understand that might be like faith healings, where if you go into like the Bible Belt, you know, they have a preacher who will magically cure somebody of their cancer or, you know, their degenerative bone conditions or whatever. And apparently, if you survey the people in attendance, 80% know that the faith healing was a show. And nonetheless, the 20% who believe that the faith healing was a real act and miracle, there's no pretense that it is just 100% real. Those 20% are the ones that held the rest of the audience in control of their needs. And so I think on Twitter that gets to be a bit ridiculous. And so oftentimes what I think I like to do is try to shake off some of that in the form of either outrage or the offense. And then it seems that if you shake off some percentage, you can then get at the heart of an issue. What I think works out well for that too is this concept wherein humans evaluate change but not state. Meaning if you present as bad and then do something good, they'll measure the distance between your presentation and your action, and then they'll judge you based on the distance. Meanwhile, if you presented as good, and then you just acted good, they would be otherwise underwhelmed. So like it kind of works perversely in the sense that if you present awful and then you are redemptive, you end up scoring more points with the right kind of people, I would suggest, than had you not done that. So it's hard because you have to do like a demographic analysis. You have to decide who it is you're going to take with you. And so I try my best to shake people who are overly concerned with what I would consider to be like trivial things or superficial things, which is often what I think is probably in the news. Unfortunately, I don't want to like sound, like I don't know, like what's the word? I don't want to sound better than anybody. It's not about that. It's more about the kind of conversation I would like to have. And I recognize that it's even abusive for certain people, but I feel like those people are people I don't have to interact with, and if they're in an adult forum, they have to deal with adult things.
And those people people usually prefer to be abused. They look.
Yeah, it's true.
No, prefer to be abused.
They look for it. No, because
I agree with that. Yes.
Well, yeah, it's right. Like they want it because that's their identity is the abused, and if they're not being abused, then they have no identity.
I see. Yeah.
Misery loves company, and there's like a network effect that happens sometimes amongst the miserable. It's very perverse, but it becomes like confirmational. Like they see that mistreatment as validating like their theory of why it is that they're losing. It's very weird.
So on Twitter,
go ahead.
Well, I think because for me it was very hard. It's very hard to answer that question of what is your tactic on Twitter if we don't really define what the game is. Because I have a real hard time with Twitter because for a lot of people it seems like the Twitter is about getting as many followers as you can. But I know for other accounts and other people, Twitter is about connecting with as many people as you can that you want to connect with, like finding people that you like, or Twitter we use our Twitter account for the show to get people to listen to the show. So I guess my question is these tactics or whatever you're doing on Twitter, what are you trying to do? Who are you trying to connect with?
Right. So I've been taking a break from the show for the last few months, and that's its own thing. But when you do the show, what you will find is you have to create the controversy. You have to create some level of either clickbait or conflict that you will be trying to resolve or otherwise carrying along your audience in like addressing. So I think a lot of, and then I think too, like the algorithms were for a while, like very evidently favoring conflict-based content. So for a good while, I was growing the show in that way. And I think that was working. It's hard to really say, but I think that at least for my own brand, that was working well. But since I started putting the show aside lately, I've just been kind of using it as like a scratch pad for ideas. And then if somebody takes the bait on like an idea that is like inherently like a conflict and I'm in the mood to argue, then I'll try to see like where it is that they differ, which is a bit of like a sort of like a psychological evaluation for me to like figure out like, okay, where is it that this idea isn't hitting with some people? And I don't necessarily even care to see the idea spread. I just kind of want to understand what the nuance might be. That's my I might change my mind in 6 months. Yeah.
So Twitter is to get people to listen to the show, is to promote the show for you.
That is largely what it has been up until like January or February of this year.
Because it doesn't seem like that's what you're doing.
Yeah,
I mean,
I've never seen a tweet since I've been following you. Granted, since like January, so yeah, about like 9 months now, where you've ever talked about your show.
Well.
It's about your personal brand. I get that.
Yeah. Some of it too is that like you've got to like find. So I think I would say with that you've got to find the guest you're going to get on the show, and you have to get a controversy that guest will address, and then when you put the show up, you would be marketing to that person's audience as well. So I think
that's the same thing.
Yeah.
That's the same thing that we do. Yeah. So that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people are on Twitter just to get followers so they can generate some sort of influence. But, I mean, yeah, it makes sense that you would keep it going as a way to kind of promote your brand, promote your show, and find people to connect with. Because that's the main reason that I'm on Twitter. It's to, like, kind of poke people until we have a rapport, maybe disagree, maybe agree on some sort of controversy, and then we talk on the show. So, yeah. Cool. Nicely done.
Hey, so I'm going to jump back to the Saifedean interview. You've never had any formal economics training, correct? Okay. Yes. So
economics training.
Oh, yeah. He's like a black belt in economics. So, and this is what I struggle with is, it feels like you said you had a growth pattern that took you away from maximalism, that took you away from libertarianism, that took you away from Austrian economics, that took you away from kind of a black and white works in a safe room if every single if every single thing falls into place perfectly, then Austrian economics works. And then you let it out into the real world and you realize that not a single aspect of it holds up once human beings who are crazy get involved and start acting irrationally. And I wonder, as a guy who hasn't been formally educated, why that seems so obvious to you, like it does me and JJ, when so many people who are, quote unquote, educated and smart about how levers work and gears work, when put into place, and and they're supposed to know when these gears fall off, everything falls apart. Yet they still, almost like a religion, they still hold on to it so tightly. But people like us, without this formal education, who just live in the real world and who see it work on a daily basis or see it not work on a daily basis, are so easily, or it can spot it so easily and talk about it so rationally. And
right.
And I guess what brought you to that, and why, and what do you want to do with that? Like, do you want to? I mean, are you actively trying to change the paradigm of Bitcoin away from maximalism and Austrian economics?
So, there's like two parts to that. I guess the first part would be the education question, and then the second part would be like, what am I trying to do with that? I've been like tortured even by like the role of education in society. Since a young age, because for whatever reason, it may very well be that I find this pursuit to be very worthwhile, and in so doing, I find myself unable to grasp what has been offered to me under this name of education, and that even gets into like this sort of like stigma that I think I was born with, such that like my last name is DeRose, and much of my life has been spent trying to understand why it is that the humans don't know roses by another name. And so I think that in the level of comprehension of the education questions you've posed, like there is this question, like, well, is this education, or is this something else by the name of education? And I found in my limited interactions with the educational institutions and seeing others' interactions with the educational institutions that obedience appears to be what's instilled at these institutions, the obedience to follow instructions, the obedience to study canon, and on and on and on. And I don't know that obedience should be discouraged, but I think that the level that it's being encouraged is a consequence to independent thinking and even rational thinking. And so I don't know. I talk to high school kids is like a thing I do. And I see this there.
That's not so bad out of context.
You just hang out outside the high school and talk to them?
With your one Bitcoin. Hey, kids, do you want a Bitcoin?
That's very questionable, I admit. I guess I do. I've done public speaking to it enough now. So I have a little bit of a repertoire with like local teachers. In particular in the computer science programs. And then I go there, and then I found myself giving them like more generalized advice in life and finance and such. And so I see this obedience there, and it's hard because like as something maybe of a role model or like an instructor, like I grapple with what the right thing to tell them is. But what is certain to me is that too much obedience is a bad thing. Too little obedience is a bad thing. And I think that what happened with education is its own deal, but I think that the real pursuit of education requires discipline. And I think that discipline is different than obedience. And so when you see people who are not particularly creative in some of these endeavors, I can't help but to think that it's a side effect of that obedience component of the process. I've seen this with attorneys. I was dating an attorney for a while, and like it's an admirable profession. And I actually think that it's an honor for anybody to become an attorney, but I can't help but to think that it's really like a significant degree of obedience training, more so than anything else.
Totally.
Yeah.
I was so all last year I taught high school, and I had big problems with it.
Okay, so you know better than me.
Yeah, I was teaching at a school that was a private school, but it kind of ran itself like a public school. And it was almost built on obedience, and not just the students, but the teachers as well. It was like,
right, yeah,
you got to fall in line as a teacher. And it created a really weird kind of feedback system where the teachers were not serving the students. The students were like, when I would meet the teacher, or when I would meet the parents in the parent-teacher conferences, the parents were more concerned with whether their kids were behaving than whether I was teaching them. It was weird. But
Right.
yeah, what you're talking about is not discipline, it's obedience, and it's obedience training. And totally, my brother's an attorney too. It's totally, see it, you're right. But relating this to, like, I mean, yeah, relating this to education and how it ties into crypto, I guess it's like, you feel like this made an impact on your life that led you to where you are now, you think?
The crypto or the educational, like,
The educational,
Yeah.
how you were educated,
Oh, yeah.
and your opinions
Hugely.
on it. I mean, like,
almost all of my
I see.
success has come from not being obedient. I
Right,
was
I see.
somehow graced with
weird.
discipline. Somehow, I don't know how, but it seems like I have recognized in myself that discipline provides ample opportunity, and it's almost like this arbitrage I've done in life, wherein I've been able to succeed in the gaps between like obedience and discipline. And it's a bit perhaps grand, but
I'm always trying to learn discipline. That's the one thing.
it's so important.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure, I guess
before
many
we tie
questions
this
as you
up?
want. Yeah.
Well, I think we should probably wrap this up soon because it's kind of a long interview, even though it's really fun to talk to you. But I think something that I really like to leave with, and I think it's really important for people, especially if they're new to crypto or they're just coming in. Something you said in the What Bitcoin Did podcast with Peter McCormick. You said that people need to understand that being interested in crypto is not a job. I don't know if you remember saying that, but
It's true. Yeah. Sounds
it's
like
something
what I said.
it was something that kind of stuck with me because I feel like a lot of people, when they get interested in crypto, they get enthusiastic about it, they get obsessed with it, but they don't know what to do with that enthusiasm. And they're emotionally invested because they've invested all their money, so they have no choice but to be emotionally invested in it. But not everyone has the creativity to go out and start a YouTube channel or start a podcast. So like, I'm always looking for things I can do to help people get involved and get moving and outside of just looking at charts all the time. And I mean, it's kind of a big question, but like, you've seen it happen over and over again. What are the good ways to get involved in? Is it just learning or what?
So one of the great shames that I think that the space has yet to accept is the complete lack of pursuit of literal decentralization. The word decentralization, I'm going to double check this here while I'm talking to you, but off the top of my head at least, the word decentralization denotes, per most dictionaries, local governance as, here we go, the dispersion or distribution of functions and powers, the delegation of power from a central authority to regional and local authorities. And somehow in all of the cheap talk, the definition has just been blown out the window. And people will get into these discussions about the relevancy of definitions, and that's all fine and good, but I think that there's at least a lot of value, not an insignificant amount of value, to this definition as proposed with local and regional authorities. And I have to confess that I have not attended local meetup groups lately for various reasons, but in so doing, that was a huge amount of the Bitcoin culture in my early days, was finding people locally. And frankly, the way that the decentralization will have to work is with people locally in these environments. The hubris of the maximalist platform is that if we are arrogant and nasty, they will come. That is not the way that the groups work. That will be probably the way that Bitcoin fails. Even if it does fail, is because of that hubris. And I think that there needs to be a renewed focus on finding like-minded people at the local level. And there's a lot that can be done. And I don't even like to talk about it publicly, generally, because I think that, how to put it, it's a heavy weight to bear. But, in the earlier days, we would provide local exchanging services at these meetups. If somebody came and they wanted to buy $20 worth of Bitcoin or $100 worth of Bitcoin, or they had to sell or whatever, it was very ad hoc. It was in fact very decentralized. There was the start of a community that would act in a way that would be consistent with how money would act. And I see that as things have gone on, frankly, we've gotten a little bit too rewarded and complacent and have stopped doing that. But because we've stopped doing that, we're watching as local Bitcoins is getting censored. We're watching as money exchangers are finding themselves losing bank accounts. And frankly, we're finding groups that are more decentralized than we are. You may not like to hear it, but I guess they're political groups in most cases. You have groups like the Proud Boys or Antifa who are doing decentralized governance per the literal definition. And it would have been nice to have been a more central, politically central, forgive the connotation of that word, but more politically central resource for people who are filled with some degree of reservation about perhaps the way things are going, but don't necessarily want to commit to those groups and want to find some alternative path. And I think we really dropped the ball in a lot of that with some of the arrogance of the maximalist platform.
So you're saying don't be an asshole, go start meetups or go to meetups and try to help educate people.
And yeah, absolutely, and grow the community.
And learn yourself and grow the community.
People think money is like a promise from a community. There's a bunch of ways to describe money, okay? But one of them is as a promise from a community. And so, if you look at the communities, which ones do you think are going to keep a promise? Which ones do you think are going to make themselves valuable to you? And right now, I see that in Decred. I see that in Monero. I don't really see that in Bitcoin, I have to say. And Ethereum, to its credit, has probably done a better job than most. And it even pains me to say that because I've never been a huge fan of Ethereum, but they have done that. And maybe even one or two others in there that are coming straight to mind. But yeah, that's a huge part of what has to be done.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's how Michael and I met, was at a meetup. And it was, yeah.
Cool.
Totally. Well, I guess that's a good place to end it.
Yeah, man. It was an
awesome
deep
ending.
Thanks, guys. That was fun for me too.
Cool. Yeah, this show had some twists and turns, but that was pretty cool. So if you're just listening to this, if you're listening to this and you don't know who Chris DeRose is, follow him on Twitter.
Don't even follow me on Twitter. I don't even care. I'm trying. Everyone's going left. I'm going to go right. You know what? Everyone's trying to build their brand right now. I'm going to say I'm just Chris DeRose. And if you know where to find me, you find me. And if you don't, that's okay.
If you like Chris DeRose, follow Keyword Crypto.
Yes.
There you go.
Follow us.
We'll take your marketing for you. How's that?
Go for it. Take it.
Yes. Is there anything that you want to promote while you're here, or just no? Screw it.
No, I will.
You're just here to be a friend.
I will promote two companies that I believe in their products in the space that don't get enough attention. And one of them is Panda Analytics. The other is Shrimpy.io. I think those two deserve more attention than they're getting. And I think that if anyone's looking to understand some of the, indexing and investment proposition, they can go to those two sites and learn and read all about it.
Those sites.
We'll put the links in the description below, but you want to give a brief overview really fast about what they do?
Yeah, tell us what they do.
Yeah, so Shrimpy.io is wonderful guys based out of San Francisco, and they provide a automated tool for interacting with every provider, every bank in the space, everything from Binance to Gemini and Coinbase and in between. And they let you create an indexing strategy. They support hardware wallets as well. And you can use a pre-built strategy that they offer, or you can roll out your own, and they'll perform auto balancing functions for you at regular intervals, and they make the whole thing super easy. I don't get paid by them in any capacity. I just like their product.
How do they make money? What's their business model? How do they make? Do they charge for the service?
You should probably try to get them on the show, because I don't think that I'm really authorized to speak for them. But what I will say is that let them come on the show. I don't want to steal that.
Well, what does it cost to use that? We'll figure it out.
This is JJ's. Awesome. It's all about what's the business model. He loves this.
Well, no, I didn't mean, I meant like, does it cost money? Like, or is there advertising involved or something?
It does cost money. It's a very small fee, but they're startups. So I think their plan is to burn some runway for the foreseeable future, and who knows from there. But again, I would defer to them on that. Let them tell that story. I'm not really, I don't know. That really is bottom line. Panda Analytics is another company that does very much the same thing. They are competitors to some degree. And I will say that Panda Analytics has better visualizations, but not as many features for rebalancing. So you could use both apps. There's a lot of overlap between them. But if you want to like backtest an indexing strategy, Panda Analytics has some great tools for that.
Oh, cool. Yeah, backtesting. That's something that people need to learn about.
Nice.
Cool. All right.
Sweet,
Thanks,
man.
Chris.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.